Hello, welcome to UMicast. My name is Sarah Cox, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Arun Harish, the Chief Strategy Officer at the Centre for Process Innovation. He's going to be telling us all about the challenges, but also great opportunities that exist with deep tech today. Thank you so much for joining us, Arun. We're here to talk about deep tech, your experience in it. Could you tell me first a little bit about how you got into this area?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And it's a pleasure to talk about deep tech, a passionate area for me personally. So let me introduce myself properly. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at CPI, Center for Process Innovation. Prior to CPI, I had good experience working with a couple of startups, both in India and in the UK. And that was very helpful as I joined CPI, which at that time was still in its infancy as an innovation center. And I've been there for 17 years now. And in hindsight, it's been one of the best things I've ever done, I should say,
Wow.
joining CPI and spending all these wonderful years in the world of innovation and deep tech, which I'll talk to you about. So in my definition of deep tech, really, I know there are different definitions floating around for deep tech, but the way I interpret it is it's a nice group of technologies, essentially. It's not just any one technology, but it's usually a blend of technologies and technological capabilities, such as it could be engineering, biology, photonics, flexible printable electronics, advanced materials, nanotechnologies, AI, quantum. So it's the multidisciplinarity that's more important, where you have one or more technologies that kind of come together to create that magic, blend of physical, chemical, biological, and increasingly digital and data sciences and technologies that converge to create some very exciting new applications. And in many cases, they can create new markets. So these are market creating innovations. And then you add layers of design thinking and systems thinking. So it's not just technologies, so layers of design systems thinking. And that grouping is what I would like to define as deep tech. So it's not a single thing. So you can view deep tech almost as a classifier. It's a group of technologies and capabilities which has the potential for transformation in industries and markets and can deliver some very significant impact, a societal impact, environmental impact. And those that embrace deep tech can also expect to see huge economic impact opportunities.
Amazing. So where do you think some of those opportunities, particularly maybe underexplored opportunities, are for the application of deep tech and kind of delivering impact where we need it?
So deep tech by nature feeds into multiple industries and multiple applications. For example, the applications of deep tech could be in life sciences. It could be in the broader sustainability and net zero agenda, for example. It can go into other applications in space or space tech. So the applications are very many and very, very diverse. Um, it is it is challenging to realize the full potential of deep tech, and I'll come on to it in terms of why I think so. It is very exciting, but it is also a lot of hard work. They are underpinned by very substantial research and development requirements. So deep tech is usually characterized by what I would define as medium to long innovation cycles. And these are cycles that can take anywhere from 5 to 15 years after you've shown that something works at a lab scale, for example. So if you're a university developing a great new technology, you can show that it works as a proof of concept in the lab. But for that proof of concept in the lab to become a commercially viable product, it could take anywhere from 5 to 15 years. And it also very heavily depends on the nature of the regulatory environment. If it is a medicine or a new medical technology, then the regulatory constraints are a lot more stringent. Equally, if it is an aerospace product, there are, so the regulatory constraints can add a lot of time and resource. So deep tech is usually characterized by medium to long innovation cycles, is a fair point. And it takes a substantial amount of money and time and resource to translate what is seen as a proof of concept in deep tech to a commercial reality. And that should not be underestimated. But if you get it right, the rewards are immense because you have a very significant opportunity to kind of capture the global market opportunity in many cases.
Mhm. I think that's fascinating. I think that we work with a lot of innovators, and anything that works needs to demonstrate it's robust and reliable, but it also needs to be delivered in a format that people want and will adopt. And it also needs to generate enough income or resource in order to go through the different stages of development. When you have something really technically complex, that becomes even harder. So I wondered if you could share some of your insights. You're talking about the importance of that multidisciplinarity. You need real kind of, technical leadership, and a long-term vision, but you imagine you also need kind of great commercial nous, and as well as you said, design thinking, systems thinking about what people want, and also how does this fit in with a complex system with a lot of needs, considering regulation and legal considerations. A huge amount there. What would be kind of like either your biggest lessons learned or examples of organizations or collaborations that have successfully negotiated that very difficult, quite long-term development cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I usually talk about CPI's well-tested innovation integrator model as a starting point, which essentially brings together 12 distinct factors that we believe are required to kind of translate deep tech proof of concepts into commercial reality. And even if one or more of these factors are not fully addressed, your commercialization is either delayed very significantly or in some cases might not happen at all. And these are fairly obvious factors, but when you put them in perspective, it really kind of makes it compelling. So for example, in the world of deep tech, you need a rock solid technological position and an IP position, right? When you talk deep tech, you are talking about technology, intellectual property, R&D underpinned, several years of resource and time and commitment that goes into getting the R&D and technology as robust as possible. If you don't have that robustness in your scientific and technological side, then sooner or later it becomes a bit wobbly, right? So you've got to get that fundamental absolutely right. So there's no compromise on the quality of the research that underpins any deep tech innovation. That's the first one. I talked about the importance of money. It's very, very important that we acknowledge that deep tech does not happen overnight. It takes years and years of hard work, and which essentially translates into resources and money. It's real cash. So you've got to find appropriate types of finance to kind of finance your journey through that deep tech proof of concept through to commercial reality. The cliched valley of death is even more deeper and broader in the context of deep tech, right? So it's a real value of death. There are very many great ideas that don't make it to the other end. So if you don't systematically take deep tech through a whole bunch of considerations, then sooner or later you'll realize that your idea will not make it to another end in the commercial space. So the third area is around market. And it's a very obvious one. Everyone talks about the cliched market pull versus technology push. My view is both are equally important. You need, otherwise you're constantly waiting for the pull. If sometimes it's good to push and see what happens in the marketplace and how consumers and markets respond. And in the world of deep tech, you've got very many great innovations that have come out due to technology push. And equally, you must have an idea of who is going to use it and why and the value proposition. So either the implicit market need or the explicit market need has to be captured early on because, uh, again, the very nature of deep tech, you will have usually technologies which are termed as platform technologies, which means it can go into multiple application areas. And it is not prudent for you to kind of chase every single application area right from the start. You've got to place your bets on one or two and optimize them to your points on how do you make sure it is robust and optimized for a given application area. So this is very important, and it's a hard judgment, evidence-based judgment innovators and early startups and SMEs will have to make fairly early on in the journey. So if you go down the wrong path, then you will have spent a lot of time and wasted resources. So how you decide which applications to pursue reasonably early on is quite an art form, but the market need, either implicit or explicit, is absolutely critical. The fourth consideration is around supply chains and value chains, right? In the context of deep tech, again, the very nature of disruptive and transformative innovation that deep tech enables, we cannot expect that the supply chains and value chains are fully mature. You have to develop the supply chains and value chains along with your own product development pathway. And sometimes it's beyond your control. How do you then control where you sit within the value chain, how your supply chain responds? So you've got a challenge in understanding the very sophisticated, the kind of the nuances around the supply chain dynamics and the value chain dynamics as you develop your deep tech product through the journey. The fifth consideration is around regulatory. Again, many people underestimate the importance of regulatory. It can make or break your innovation very, very rapidly. So, early considerations that have to go into the regulatory thinking can be very helpful for deep tech. And there are experts out there who can support you on the journey. Um, I want to also talk about the people. We should never underestimate the importance of the lead entrepreneur or the champion who kind of does not give up. You need those champions to hold on to these great ideas and take them through the journey. And the people who need to support, we need different skill set, technical, commercial, regulatory, access to finance. All of those are equally critical. And the very nature of deep tech, because it takes such a long time, there's a good tendency for people to lose patience and lose the will. So how do you persevere and keep going? There will be many, many hurdles and challenges. So you've got to go through all of that. It's not SMEs are used to it, but I just want to reiterate that we work with hundreds of SMEs, and it's probably the single most common thing. The time and effort it takes to turn deep tech products into commercial reality. So these are the types of considerations, and I'm not going to talk through all the 12 factors. But for me, the rigor that needs to go into the R&D and technological side, the IP positioning, understanding of the market, either implicit or explicit, the regulatory considerations, the supply and value chain positioning, the people and the entrepreneurial spirit, they're all absolutely critical factors as you go through the journey. What I want to also highlight is the importance of what we call as uh, innovation assets or innovation partnerships, right? In the world of deep tech, increasingly there is a recognition that you just cannot do everything on your own. If you're an SME, very, very rare that you can do all of the end-to-end stuff on your own. It's just not capitally efficient, it's not resource efficient, and even investors increasingly are recognizing that. So the importance of partnerships should not be underestimated, and you will have different types of partners. And I want to talk about partnership with innovation assets and innovation centers, if you like, which CPI is one of them as a lead catapult center in the UK ecosystem. The access SMEs can have to capitally efficient and resource efficient capabilities is hugely beneficial to SMEs, especially when they are very early on their journey towards commercialization. And even investors really support that, because the investors' money will go a long way if it is utilized in a highly capital efficient and a resource efficient manner. And the credibility these SMEs and innovators gain by working with innovation centers is also very important. So by accessing innovation centers, they have ready access to equipment, people who bring a wealth of experience from multiple industries and develop been there, done that. So SMEs then can tap into not just SMEs, but young innovators and entrepreneurs can tap into that wealth of experience and expertise and capabilities without having to reinvent every single bit.
Yeah.
So the innovation assets are increasingly becoming a feature in how deep tech innovation progresses. And the good news is private investors are increasingly recognizing this, and they are encouraging their investee companies uh, prior to and post investment to build more effective partnerships that would give them greater credibility and a greater chance of success, essentially.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and it's always great to have those assets that reduce the risk, but just also sometimes the less tangible assets of the people and the expertise that can help guide you as well. There's something you mentioned that's very interesting, and I think a lot of the businesses that I speak to, that are in this very innovative space are interested in. It's that market element. You described it as a bit of an art form to be able to figure out when you have a very innovative technology. And a lot of the innovators that we work with or speak to will say some variation of, particularly if it's technically complex, you've got design for the market of 10 to 15 years down the road, which is, very true of deep tech when it has that long tail of development. Do you have any advice for maybe particularly those small and medium-sized businesses, startup scale-ups that are working in this space, and how they can maybe tap into the expertise that is out there to think about those market applications in markets that don't exist yet that they might be shaping, so they can construct an opportunity effectively and kind of build that passion and that belief in the that will hopefully help them stay the course? Do you have any advice for kind of smaller businesses that are in that space at the moment?
It's a key question, Sarah. And if I describe the journey for deep tech innovators, from what might be a proof of concept, an early lab based proof of concept, to a bit more of a sophisticated proof of concept that can be demonstrated within appropriate environments, it needs to go a step further. And the key word I would use here is around market demonstration. So, planning for market demonstration activities at the appropriate scale and under appropriate quality systems is hugely critical in the success for any deep tech product. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, the market demonstration activities are a great means to test the appetite from the potential users or consumers of these technologies and products eventually. And the iterative refinement of the deep tech products after you run some early market demonstration activities is hugely critical in addressing the point you made earlier. How do you then iterate and fine tune and customize your products to suit those segments of the markets or consumers who then ultimately become your main buyers, essentially? So that activity around market demonstration should not be underestimated. And it again, it depends on the nature of the innovation or product. If you're developing a new medical technology or a medical device, for example, you need enough devices or products to feed into perhaps appropriate clinical validation stages. And you can't put something into a clinical validation stage if it is not at an appropriate scale or volume, or if it's not manufactured in the appropriate quality systems, for example. Um, if it is a product that goes into a mass consumer goods industry, let's say into the fast moving consumer goods industry, you would want to test something at a scale and a volume which is appropriate, where you're testing out a mass consumer consumption there. So how do you make the appropriate volume of your product, your deep tech innovation or a product, and how do you fund that activity is also a key challenge which many SMEs will encounter at some point on their journey. Without which, I don't think the ultimate customers or the buyers of these products, it could be government, it could be industry, it could be individuals, they will not be convinced of the benefits the new deep tech innovations are likely to bring. They will not be able to test out all the features, and therefore you're unable to realize the full potential of your deep tech innovation. So having a robust plan for market demonstration when you're ready for it is absolutely critical, and that will hopefully address the question you've raised.
I think that, yeah, that's something that, I see a lot of. And regardless of the technical complexity of the business, I think figuring out creative ways you can prototype the value proposition, even if the technology isn't robust enough yet. Simultaneously, it's this thing of this multidisciplinary skill set needed to get something to down that 10 to 15 year runway. Uh, the ability to think creatively about how you might test out what this will deliver when the technology has been validated at the same time as you're doing the technical development is incredibly valuable, because those things interplay and can inform the technical development as that informs the value proposition or the marketplace positioning. So that's really interesting. We're based in the northeast of England here, and one of the things we do have in the region is a very strong research base, and some very kind of world leading universities. And with deep tech, it's particularly one of those industries where strong university collaborations or spin outs from universities is a big part of the ecosystem that we work within. Do you have any advice for whether they might be ambitious innovators that are looking to spin out a business from a university, or universities themselves that are looking to be more active supporters of kind of successful deep tech innovation?
Yeah, the universities are very actively spinning out deep tech companies, and that's very encouraging to see. Not just in the UK, but it's a global phenomenon. You see that in Europe, you see that in the US, and other parts of Asia as well. In the UK, I see that the universities usually will have a capacity challenge to support every single opportunity that comes through their system. So they've got to prioritize, and because because of the nature of deep tech, and you've got to think about intellectual property protection, patenting, and suddenly the costs can mount up very very rapidly. So, how do you, if you're a university tech transfer office who's dealing with all of these opportunities, how do you then prioritize which ones do you back, which ones do you kind of put on a bit of a hold mode and wait for other drivers to kick in? So, it's not straightforward as saying I'm going to support every single idea that comes through the system. So, they have to be judicious, and prioritization is critical. But having said that, the number of deep tech companies that come out of universities as spinouts is very, very encouraging. And we've seen a great deal come out of some of the Northeast universities as well. And again, the same story applies, right? So as soon as they become a spinout, then they're a legal entity in their own right. They can still have a lot of support from the academic base and tap into the research strengths, but you're on your own, which means you've got to go and find out where to raise capital from, what's the market potential, all the considerations that any deep tech SME would face is true for university spinouts as well. But again, they're not limited necessarily to work just with the university where they've been spun out from. They, if needed, they can collaborate with other universities anywhere in the country or anywhere across the globe even. And this is where the role of the lead entrepreneur and the champion, if you like, becomes so critical, because these are the individuals who don't let go of these ideas no matter what.
Yeah.
They really latch on to it and make sure they do the right things and the best possible things to accelerate the pathway towards commercialization.
And maybe if I ask again a bit of a ambitious question, but if you had kind of a magic wand, what would you like to see the role of policymaking and kind of local and national government in sort of the deep tech system of the future?
So there are a number of things that can be done. One of which is I would allocate more cash and resource at the interfaces. And when I say interfaces, at the interfaces between, for example, simplistically, let's say that the interface between universities and catapults, or universities and industry. So, because these are real, if you add more resources here by doing so, you're able to spend more time, put more quality into the assessment and prioritization of opportunities. And that way you can get more ideas through the pipeline, and with better prioritization you then are creating greater chances for success. So this requires, the UK has many universities, many great ones. If you want to look at all the different sectors, from advanced manufacturing to life sciences to space tech and semiconductors to national security, it's quite a breadth of opportunities that most universities can respond to and then come out with innovations, right? And if you want to do justice at each for each of these sectors at the interfaces I've described, that's a significant financial commitment. And I think that could be a significant policy uh, intervention, where we make more intentional commitments at those interfaces to fast track how the university technology transfer and commercialization could happen, and which means you're enabling greater conversations to happen, greater access to other capabilities that partners have, and you're able to fast track. So that's one significant intervention I would make. And similarly, at a local level, prioritizing innovation activities is important, because if you don't do that, the status quo is likely to continue. And especially for regions like the Northeast, you really want to reshape regional economic growth enabled by innovation. And that's a real opportunity. And by committing more intentional resources and um, by undertaking activities that would support innovation enabled economic growth, you can then create opportunities for longer term reshaping of regions.
Fantastic. I think that uh, we're really keen to see that kind of innovation agenda prioritized. And we've got some great innovators in the region doing amazing things, but the more support we can provide at that kind of introductory level, the more innovators can both engage with it, but also have that higher quality of market opportunity coming out more quickly, being able to make that assessment of where are the opportunities and where are the industry partners that I could work with to really take this kind of to the marketplace. So that's been some really valuable points there. Um, are there any particular examples of how these different actors from different sectors have worked together on projects that you've seen and that have been very successful? And could you take us a little bit through the stages of development? So if I were an innovator listening who's, maybe just starting out my deep tech journey, I'm passionate about delivering an impact, I've got a load of technical skill, but I'm just at the beginning of that. What might that journey look like at each stages? And do you have an example of a project or initiative or business that you've worked with or seen work that's been kind of a real exemplar of that kind of multidisciplinary collaborative working and getting over those massive challenges?
Yeah, there are again examples. I don't want to quote any specific names of companies for any confidentiality reasons, but if I generalize examples, let's say in the life sciences space, for example, right? Great ideas usually start in the lab or in the research space, or by very bright entrepreneurs who spot an opportunity and then go and pull things together from wherever they are, from an academic lab, or they can secure access to intellectual property. So from that idea generation point, whether it's driven by a clear and an explicit market need, or stemming out of a technology or a research capability that you've got, you really, I don't think there's a substitute for thorough business plans. And that's the absolutely key starting point for most young companies or innovators, where you need at least 3 to 5 year business plan. Of course, some things are very hard to kind of predict what's
Mhm.
likely to happen in 3 to 5 years time frame. But having an idea on what your technology is, where is it likely to go, and the usual good models like the business model canvas and all of that, what problems are you solving, whose pain are you solving, go through the grind as the basic set of things you've got to do. But more importantly, appreciate that anything that is regarded as deep tech or R&D intensive it will take time. So there's no point in forcing shortcuts, because if you try and take shortcuts, it will come and bite you very badly. So acknowledging that deep tech will take time, even if you throw more money at it, sometimes it won't work. It might at best give you 6 months or a year of time advantage, which you have the luxury of securing that money, of course, to it. But acknowledging that these things take time, and having a thorough understanding of where will this application or innovation ultimately fit, and what problems will it solve, what benefits and impact will it help realize, is the best approach, in my opinion. At the heart of deep tech is what we refer to as the scale up of technologies. Scale up is an interesting term. It sometimes get mixed up with the scale up of companies. How do companies scale up beyond a certain point into growth? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the technological scale up. So, for example, if you're a chemical company, you've got a recipe that works at this coffee mug scale. You cannot expect that the same recipe would work if you're making 100,000 tons volume of that chemical. So, you've got to develop the recipes and optimize the recipes to scale up the volume from a coffee mug scale to whatever scale you want. And that's true for many technologies in many areas. So the hard work that needs to go into optimizing your scale up of technologies on that journey, particularly so for most of the deep tech applications, is sometimes the most difficult bit. And if you try and force any shortcuts there, that's a clear recipe for disaster. So, because ultimately you've got to have a product that fits the requirements in the final operational environment, whether it's a medicine or a sustainability product, or an aerospace innovation or a space tech, where you are talking about robustness and operations under extreme environments. If you're a materials company developing some novel materials that would operate under harsh environments, for example. So how do you then go through that kind of a scale up journey from early technology readiness levels, which again is popularly used in the community, the kind of TRL 3-4 interface, through to the TRL 7-8 interface, systematically go through the journey to gain enough confidence that your technology will be robust at that scale. That whole thing should not be underestimated, and no shortcuts is a key point I just wanted to land, particularly relevant for deep tech innovators and SMEs. And access to finance can trip you up if you're not careful. So plan well ahead. What's your plan A, what's the plan B, what's the plan C, and a D and an E, right? Because if you don't raise capital at the appropriate stages, then you're either getting into some serious cash flow issues, and maybe we've known many companies that go literally bankrupt halfway through their journey, and or it can very significantly delay the time to market, neither of which is ideal, certainly not the first one. So how do you sustain through difficult periods when you're still raising capital, you still prove your technology, you're still pre-revenue, there are no other streams of revenue that you can tap into? So these are some of the real challenges. But I don't want to make it all sound like it's just hard work. At the end of it,
Hard
work. It's a very rewarding journey if you're a deep tech company with intellectual property, and if you're opening up, especially if you're in the world of market creating innovations, you pretty much got a global lead, if not a national lead there, right? So certainly it's a global leadership position you can aspire for with most of these deep tech innovations, and you will then have the luxury to reap the rewards at least over a 10-20 year period, through whichever form of trade, sale or an exit, or royalties or listing, whatever you choose to do at that point. Um, and there are many, many great examples of some local companies who are on that journey, some that have achieved that, and many more to go through that grind, and hopefully we'll reach the successful point.
Amazing. So I think we've covered some really interesting points there. There's so much complexity in this space, and having that kind of passion and drive and vision, but also collaborative ability to navigate your way through a 10 to 15-year journey to hopefully having that market shaping breakthrough. What would be one or two key things you would like the audience listening to take away from the discussion we've just had?
Yeah, I have shared some of the kind of the challenges and opportunities for deep tech innovators, right? Whether small companies or spin-outs or even large corporates for that matter. The the point I want to make is it is these deep tech innovators who are really contributing very substantially to the global positive impact, whether it is in health or society or environment. So, despite the hard work, there's something very exciting at the end, which I hope uh, innovators and policymakers and funders all appreciate, because deep tech has the potential to deliver that very substantial global impact, and it's increasingly becoming so. Whether it be the COVID vaccine or some of the sustainability and net zero technologies or space tech or semiconductors, these are game changing, disruptive, transformative, and in many cases market creating innovations that can deliver very substantial societal, health, and environmental impact. So there's a big motivation factor for innovators and SMEs beyond the financial, is the point I want to make. Yes, if all goes well, you'll be rewarded by some very substantial financials, but equally exciting for me is the impact it can unlock. So there's a lot to play for you through deep tech would be my key message.
Amazing. And I think we focus a lot on SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses, you know, being the innovators that are leading in this space, but they can only do so much and they only have so many hours in the day. So I think that kind of call to action for leaders across industry to engage with deep tech and to reach out to organizations like yourself, the Center for Process Innovation, to engage more effectively with those innovators and find out what is at the cutting edge and what might provide value for them would be a great thing we'd love to see more of.
No, pleasure to. Yes.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you very much.